While the WWF were putting on some great shows in 1992, business was actually down in the United States. Wrestling in itself had done some incredible numbers during the mid to late 80s, but by the time 1992 came around, the WWF had lost a lot of casual fans who maybe saw wrestling as more of a fad than anything else. Plus, you also had scandals and allegations that painted wrestling as a whole in a bad light. On the flip side of this though, business was booming in Europe. The WWF's European tours had been incredibly successful, and fans across the pond were more enamoured than ever with pro wrestling, whereas some fans in the United States had moved on. SummerSlam 1992 was originally scheduled to take place in Washington DC, but because of the booming business in Europe and the dwindling numbers in the United States, Vince McMahon decided to break new ground and bring SummerSlam across the pond. With the help of WWF's UK event and merchandise promoters Martin and Harvey Goldsmith, the 1992 edition of SummerSlam took place in the United Kingdom, the very first time a Big Four WWF pay-per-view was held in Europe. It was a good move as proven by ticket sales. It's been reported that 65,000 tickets were sold in just 5 days, clearly proving that fans in the United Kingdom were clamouring to see a big live event take place in their own backyard. The venue for such a colossal event? Wembley Stadium, the most iconic football ground in the United Kingdom, or soccer ground for viewers in the States. The significance and importance of Wembley Stadium can't be overstated though, especially to wrestling fans across the pond. Originally known as the Empire Stadium, the first match played at Wembley was the 1923 FA Cup final, and renovations that ended in 1963 gave us the Wembley Stadium you saw in '92. The original Wembley Stadium. The first ground to be given the moniker of Hollow Turf, the original Wembley hosted 5 European Cup finals, the 1966 World Cup final, the Euro 96 finals, the 1948 Summer Olympics, 1992 and 1995 Rugby League World Cup finals. But while Wembley would host multiple sporting attractions, it was always the home of English football. Or as Pele put it, Wembley Stadium was the capital, cathedral and heart of football. It wasn't just sporting events though that made the venue so legendary. It became a goal and a privilege for musicians to one day play at Wembley Stadium, and Wembley went on to host artists and bands such as Queen, Pink Floyd, Bruce Springsteen, Michael Jackson, the Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Oasis, the Eagles, Guns N' Roses and Elton John, just to name a few. The WWF storming Wembley Stadium was maybe a bigger deal than some fans actually realise. It can't be overstated how important Wembley truly is to sports and entertainment of the whole United Kingdom, and by all accounts the WWF certainly understood how big of a deal it was. If you take a look at the seating arrangement for SummerSlam, for example, you'll notice that the crowd made up a giant Union flag as they sat, screamed, jumped and shouted from their seats. Martin and Harvey Goldsmith were more than instrumental in bringing SummerSlam to the United Kingdom, but who were these guys and how did they pull this off? Well, it's a case of it's not what you know, it's who you know. Harvey Goldsmith was an events and rock and roll promoter, and he worked with Cyndi Lauper. Lauper, of course, had a strong relationship with the World Wrestling Federation during the 80s, and it was Lauper who suggested to Harvey that the WWF could do big things in the United Kingdom. British homegrown wrestling had took a dip in popularity during the 80s, and Harvey understood that the overall presentation of the World Wrestling Federation could bring some young wrestling fans back into the fold. Vince McMahon was also in the middle of negotiations with Sky TV to bring WWF to the UK, so both Harvey and his brother Martin flew to Connecticut to try to cut a deal to bring WWF tours to the United Kingdom. The first UK show, co-promoted by the Goldsmiths and Vince McMahon, sold out in under 5 minutes. Martin said, Vince couldn't believe it, they were absolutely over the moon. I did a contract with them which gave me the domestic rights for all merchandising and licensing products with WWE branding on them. We did a couple of shows and WWE couldn't believe there was 10,000 people in the arenas. Within a year, a licensing program for WWE branded products had been set up, and so the WWF started to completely dominate the UK and European markets. So now you had Harvey dealing with the event side of things while Martin took care of merchandising. With the dip in viewership in the United States, McMahon and Harvey discussed the possibility of bringing SummerSlam to the United Kingdom, seeing the potential in a hungry UK audience who just couldn't get enough wrestling at the time. Martin said, Vince McMahon had this ambition of putting on the biggest show and bringing it to the United Kingdom. There was a huge amount of cynicism around it, but by then we had built up a regular touring route around Europe. We weren't just talking the UK, it was places like Germany and France where we'd always sell out. Wembley Stadium was cynical, but Harvey persuaded them that this was going to be a massive event, and it was, as you know. Probably on the first day we sold 40,000 tickets and we ended up selling 80,000, which was massive. It was one of their biggest crowds ever. Of course there was the use of the football pitch, so all that space made extra seating. We were the merchandising company, we still hold the record now, at least I don't think it has been broken, but we sold £1.2 million of merchandise that day. Naturally, there's an issue with time differences, and this is something the WWF would have to overcome. SummerSlam 1992 took place on Saturday, August 29th, but it wasn't broadcast live to neither the UK nor the United States. The USA broadcast was missing 3 matches, but for some reason, the UK broadcast was also missing a match, Crush vs Repo Man. The UK Silvervision VHS release of SummerSlam, however, it contained every single match, so that's what we're going to be looking at today, the video release. I have no idea why this version isn't on the WWE Network, so if anyone out there is listening from the WWE, upload the proper version please. Papa Shango vs Tito Santana, Tatanka vs the Berzerker, and a 6-man tag pitting Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Bushwhackers against the Mountie and the Nasty Boys. These are all missing from the USA broadcast and the USA home video releases, but thankfully the full UK VHS release is still obtainable. The Tagged Classics DVD featuring SummerSlam 92 and 93 features the entire show. So let's look at SummerSlam 1992 and we can talk about each match as they're presented on the show. The broadcast opens up with a bunch of young fans outside Wembley and they're all excited to see their favourite superstars. The Ultimate Warrior is facing Randy Savage tonight and fans are debating about whose corner Mr. Perfect will be in during the WWF title match, but we'll talk about that a little later. These young ladies here are excited to see Shawn Michaels, and here is the infamous British Bulldog girl.
The British Bulldog's gonna win, whether he wants to or not.
This young fan became just as legendary as SummerSlam itself, and just recently the Bulldog girl revealed her identity over on Twitter. There's a real big time event feel outside Wembley Stadium leading into SummerSlam though, that's for sure. UK fans just didn't get events like this, and we still haven't since SummerSlam 92, so there's a load of excitement going into the event. We have some trumpet fanfare inside Wembley and we get a look at the venue completely packed with ravenous WWF fans. Vince McMahon and Bobby Heenan welcome us to SummerSlam. McMahon is excited to be inside Wembley Stadium while Bobby Heenan puts a crown on, declaring himself Sir Bobby, the King of England. Vince and Heenan ponder over which side Mr. Perfect will take tonight in the WWF title match, but the fans in the UK weren't going to see the Warrior vs Savage match in the main event. Oh no, countryman Davey Boy Smith was going to headline this show. The British Bulldog vs Bret Hart for the IC title was in the main event spot, and fans would get treated to a true wrestling classic and one of the greatest Intercontinental title matches of all time. Our first match then is a 6-man tag, the Bushwhackers and Jim Duggan versus the Nasty Boys and the Mountie, and this bout gets around 13 minutes of ring time. The fans love the Bushwhackers and Duggan, and while the action inside the ring is nothing to write home about, the exciting thing about this match is just watching fans react to seeing the first bout take place inside Wembley. The younger fans are absolutely loving it, and by the looks of things, Martin Goldsmith must have made a killing with those foam fingers. The first thing you notice is just how long the entranceway is. The superstars had to walk half the length of Wembley just to get into the ring. The opening 6-man tag here is booked to get the fans pumped up. There's a lot of pandering, a lot of time wasting, but the competitors do a good job of working the crowd. It isn't a good match, but it's a fun match, and SummerSlam 92 just doesn't feel right without starting off with this bout. Duggan pins the Mountie to get the win, and the crowd goes nuts. Papa Shango faced El Matador next, and what's interesting here is that this was actually supposed to be Kerry Von Erich versus Papa Shango, a match that I'm pretty sure would have made the USA broadcast had it actually happened. The Texas Tornado was on his way out of the company though. Failed wellness tests resulted in Von Erich getting released just before SummerSlam, and so Kerry got replaced with Tito Santana. Papa Shango gets the win with a shoulder breaker. The match was pretty average, but it gave fans a chance to settle in after the opening bout. It's a shame Kerry Von Erich didn't make it to Wembley, but well, it is what it is. Next up is the tag team match pitting Money Inc. versus the Legion of Doom, and this is where the USA broadcast and home video begins. Fans will remember Hawk and Animal's motorbike entrance at SummerSlam 92, and they'll also remember Rocco riding along with Paul Ellering. But there was a lot going on behind the scenes here that makes this entrance kinda bittersweet. This would be the Legion of Doom's final match together for nearly 3 years. Road Warrior Hawk wasn't happy with the direction the Legion of Doom were going in within the WWF. He hated how the Rocco puppet was getting marketed alongside the Road Warriors, and he was also anticipating his third failed wellness test. Immediately following SummerSlam, Hawk would completely disappear from TV. Animal suffered a back injury shortly afterwards, and everyone thought the legendary Road Warriors were done with. But the team showed up on WCW Nitro on the 29th of January 1996. You guys all watch Reliving the War, so you know that already. Road Warrior Animal said the Legion of Doom were originally slotted into a semi-main spot against the Natural Disasters at SummerSlam, but due to Hawk's problems, the Road Warriors were put near the start of the show. But you know, in saying that, it's not that bad of a spot. I mean, they were working against Money Inc., and it's been said that the opening match can be just as important as the last match, and in a way, LOD versus Money Inc. was the opening match, at least for fans across the pond. Still, with all this being said, the match is worth watching. The Road Warriors entrance is pretty legendary. The fans go crazy for Hawk and Animal. Road Warrior Hawk was maybe off a step or two, and you can definitely tell that his heart isn't in it. But it's still a fun bout and a match that many people still remember from SummerSlam 92. The timing of the finish though does seem a little off. IRS saves DiBiase from a doomsday device, but Hawk is just left perched on the top rope with nothing to do. He eventually jumps down and he punches IRS, and Animal gets the win with a power slam. Former WWF champion Ric Flair gets interviewed by Mean Gene Okerlund next, and Flair isn't happy about the title situation at SummerSlam. Flair wanted a shot at Randy's WWF title. Ric Flair does not have a match inside Wembley Stadium, and that's a real shame. Flair is in his wrestling gear though, and the Nature Boy says you never know when you need to be ready for action. Flair's executive consultant, Mr. Perfect, is going to be in the corner of either Warrior or the Macho Man. Mean Gene asks Flair who will Perfect support later in the evening, and Flair doesn't answer. He decides to laugh instead. Sean Mooney then interviews Virgil. Virgil is facing Nails next, and Virgil says he's too legit to quit while throwing punches at poor Mooney. Vince McMahon says afterwards that crime does not pay in regards to Nails, and what an understatement that was. The whole Nails versus Vince McMahon controversy started over this SummerSlam match and the payoff Nails got for facing Virgil, but we'll talk about that another time. Virgil versus Nails went on for around 3.5 minutes, and it's nothing special at all. Probably the weakest match on the card. The WWF could have removed the Virgil promo and the match during the USA broadcast, and instead added the Papa Shango match or something, but yeah, no other way to say it. Virgil versus Nails was absolutely brutal. Nails gets the win with a chokehold somehow, and Nails attacks Virgil afterwards with the Big Boss Man's nightstick. Lord Alfred Hayes is running around backstage trying to find Mr. Perfect. He's outside the Macho Man's locker room and the door is locked. No one's answering, so his lordship can't confirm if Mr. Perfect is in there with Savage or not. Alfred says he will continue searching for Mr. Perfect throughout the show. Next up, we have an interview with Sensational Sherry, the valet of Shawn Michaels. Sherry's been smitten with both HBK and Shawn's opponent for the evening, the model Rick Martel, and Sherry has managed to get a little stipulation added to this bout. There'll be no hitting in the face during this matchup. That's right, Michaels and Martel are not going to hit each other in the face during an entire wrestling match, but you just know that that's going to get thrown out the window. Another fun match here. When things break down and the two men start hitting each other, Sherry pretends to faint. This results in both men wanting to carry Sherry backstage, but Shawn and Martel can't stop fighting each other on the entranceway. It's silly, some of you purists out there may scoff at such a match, but I thought it was fun, and I still do. It's quite clear that the nose candy is of high quality in London, as the Nasty Boys are seen laughing at sensational Sherry. There's no discussion of the Nasty Boys opening match here, as Sags and Nobbs say they want a tag team title shot. Jimmy Hart says he'll get the Nasty Boys a title shot in the future. The Beverly Brothers and the Genius are in the ring next, and they're going to take on the tag team champions Earthquake and Typhoon, the Natural Disasters. Remember, this was initially going to be the Disasters versus the Legion of Doom, but that didn't happen. Earthquake and Typhoon get a great ovation from the audience, but when the bell rings, it turns into a painfully standard WWF tag team match. The Disasters use their size to keep the heels at bay to begin with, but eventually the Beverlys cheat to keep Typhoon away from his tag team partner. To be fair, it does pay off. There's a great pop when Earthquake eventually gets into the ring, but it definitely looks like one of those matches that would have been much better if you were actually in the crowd. It goes a little long also at nearly 11 minutes. Earthquake ends up getting the win with a power slam and the Earthquake splash. The Disasters grab the Genius afterwards and Lanny Poffo gets dumped over the top rope. The Bushwhackers get interviewed by Mean Gene next, and it looks like Luke and Butch were hanging out with the Nasty Boys during the last match. These two are sweating buckets and they're absolutely hyped to the gills. Mean Gene says a dentist in the UK will give Luke a London bridge, and Mean Gene says that the Bushwhackers have been invited to Buckingham Palace for dinner. Butch says that he hopes to sit on the royal throne, and Luke hopes his tag team partner brings something to read. The search for Mr. Perfect continues, and Lord Hayes is now outside the Warriors' locker room. Alfred says he's going to breach his own code of ethics by storming into the locker room to prove Perfect is in there with the Warrior. Alfred tries to break in, but someone just closes the door. Alfred says this was a shocking and vulgar act of rudeness. Back to the ring, and we have the Repo Man versus Crush, the Battle of Demolition. This match wasn't included in the original UK broadcast for some reason, and it does make you wonder why. I'm not saying it's a great match, but it's certainly better than Virgil versus Niels. Imagine too if this was actually the Battle of Demolition, and instead of Repo Man, Barry Darsow was instead decked out in his Demolition Smash gear, and Crush had his Demolition Crush gear. I'm sure there would have been a lot more attention given to a Demolition versus Demolition match, but yeah, that ship had long sailed, and instead we have Kona Crush and the Repo Man. Crush gets the win with the Kona Clutch. The World Wrestling Federation Championship match is up next, and Mean Gene gives the history leading up to this bout. Randy Savage vs Warrior was set in stone, but Ric Flair and Mr. Perfect had been playing mind games with both competitors. Perfect said he was going to be in either the Macho Man or Warrior's corner for the bout, trying to create some paranoia between the two men, but as you're about to find out, it was really all for nothing. It's been heavily rumoured that the Ultimate Warrior was asked to turn heel at SummerSlam 92, and the match would end with Warrior aligning himself with Perfect and Flair, but the Warrior refused at the last minute. Take all that with a grain of salt, although it does kind of make sense when you consider the match build-up. Warrior would also find himself out of a job a few weeks after SummerSlam, along with Davey Boy Smith and Road Warrior Hawk and Kerry Von Erich. The WWF were clearly trying to clean the place up due to those ongoing allegations. But anyway, Warrior versus Savage at SummerSlam 92, and oh boy, the audience were absolutely pumped up for this one. The Warrior comes out first, and there's no Mr. Perfect. The Macho Man walks into Wembley Stadium, and again, there's no Mr. Perfect. Halfway through the match, Flair and Perfect show up, and we think they're on the Warriors' side, but it turns out they were just there to cause trouble for both men. The match ends with Savage trying to attack Flair, but Flair hits the Macho Man on the leg with a steel chair, and because Savage couldn't get back in the ring, the Warrior won via countout. Flair and Perfect continued attacking the Macho Man, and the Warrior chased the heels away, and the Macho Man and the Ultimate Warrior celebrated together in the ring to end the segment. If you want to see Savage vs Warrior, stick with WrestleMania 7. Flair and Perfect cut a promo afterwards, and Perfect said that the deal he had was always with Ric Flair. It wasn't with Savage and it wasn't with the Warrior. Flair and Perfect have a plan B, and plan B will end with the WWF title being back around the waist of the Nature Boy. I'll say it again though, it's a shame that Flair didn't have a proper match at SummerSlam 92. Another match that was left off the USA broadcast is up next, the Berzerker vs Tatanka. The audience has been in Wembley for nearly 2.5 hours at this point, but they're still as energised as ever. But even the crowd can't save this one really. You aren't missing much if you've never saw Tatanka versus the Berzerker at Wembley Stadium. Tatanka gets the pinfall win after around 5 minutes of action. This match though was actually in the semi-main spot of SummerSlam 92. On the videotape and during the UK broadcast, the Undertaker vs Kamala was the match right before the Bret vs Davey match, but in reality, the Hitman and the Bulldog followed Tatanka and the Berzerker. It's clear why they done this though, the Undertaker's match is definitely more fitting of the semi-main spot. The dead man comes to the ring in a hearse as the sky in London is now pitch black. It's another legendary entrance that took place at SummerSlam, and another one of those entrances that you see getting replayed quite a lot. The entrance is certainly more noteworthy than the match itself. Undertaker vs Kamala is around 3.5 minutes long, and the only time the crowd really popped during the match was when Taker went after Kim Chi and Harvey Whippleman. The match ended with Kim Chi jumping into the ring and the ref called for a DQ finish. Kamala attacked the Undertaker after the match, setting up a rematch that would take place at the 1992 Survivor Series. The crowd popped again when the Undertaker set up afterwards, but yeah, you have to admit sometimes when a match is bad, and this one was pretty bad. Still, the UK fans loved seeing the Undertaker, and because of the entrance, it's still something you should sit through while checking this pay-per-view out. There's a lot of hype going into the IC title main event match, and the World Wrestling Federation done a great job of building up anticipation for the final bout to take place inside Wembley. Sean Mooney interviews Davey Boy Smith first, and Mooney starts things off by saying this upcoming main event has tore the Hart family apart. Davey said it wasn't him who made the match, it was President Jack Tunney. Davey says Bret may be his brother-in-law, but when the Bulldog steps inside the ring, he's never met the Hitman before and he doesn't even know the Hitman. Davey hopes that after this match the family can reunite, and Davey says it's a dream to perform in front of 80,000 fans at Wembley Stadium, and it's a dream to be the Intercontinental Champion. Mean Gene Okerlund is with Bret the Hitman Hart, and the Hitman is pissed off that Davey said he doesn't know Bret Hart as soon as the bell rings. Bret says that it was he who introduced Davey to his sister, and it was he who got him opportunities within the World Wrestling Federation. Davey wanted the big fight, and Davey has got the big fight. And this big dream of Davey winning the IC title in Wembley will turn into a nightmare. The Balmoral Highlanders then play the bagpipes, and the WWF surprises the fans by having Roddy Piper make an appearance. Piper plays Scotland the Brave with the Balmoral Highlanders, and again, the audience loves it. Also, did you know that bagpipes were classified as a weapon in 1996? Well, now you do. Sean Mooney interviews Diana Hart next, who's sitting in the audience, and Diana is torn to pieces about the upcoming match. Now, Diana Hart gets a lot of flack, but she plays the part perfectly here. She says this is going to be difficult for her to watch. This is the biggest match of Bret and Davey's lives, and she's sorry that she has become kind of an obstacle for both men. Diana doesn't care who wins. She loves her brother and she loves her husband, and her family is more valuable to her than the Intercontinental belt. She's honoured, however, to be with her husband and her brother as they go into battle in the SummerSlam main event. I'm not going to go over this match move for move, that's a video for the future, but this is one incredible bout, and it's even more incredible when you understand the circumstances going into this match. Davey was absolutely gone here. It's been reported that he was legit hitting the pipe the night before with Jim Neidhart, and I don't mean the bagpipes either. So far gone was the British Bulldog that he got in the ring and he totally forgot the match that he and Bret had laid out. Davey's memory of the spots and high spots were completely gone, and here he was in Wembley Stadium on his way to the biggest moment of his entire career. Thank God that Davey was in the ring with Bret Hart, because the Hitman took the lead and the Hitman called the entire match inside the ring. Everything was done on the fly, and while you'd think that this would lead to an average match, it actually turned into an absolute classic. There are a few shaky moments, like when Davey forgot to grab Bret during this plancha and Bret nearly twisted his ankle and Davey nearly broke his neck, but all in all, it's a truly gripping match, and it's made even more special by the fans in attendance. Davey gets the win in the end, and it gives us one of the greatest pops in the history of professional wrestling. Bret revealed that he was slightly annoyed that Davey kept pandering to the audience afterwards though. The two had told this story of a family at war, and Davey should have kept his focus on Bret, but what are you going to do? It's a miracle the match went as well as it did in the first place. Bret also said that he was the true winner at SummerSlam 92, as this match showed the WWF that the Hitman could carry a main event match no matter what the circumstances. And he was right. Bret was now on a path to the WWF Championship, and as for Davey Boy Smith, well, he had also found himself on the long list of wrestlers who got released after SummerSlam 92. Again, don't worry, I'm covering this whole match in detail in the near future, so make sure you're subscribed. SummerSlam 1992 received 280,000 domestic pay-per-view buys, the second highest of the year, but still a very low number in comparison to pay-per-views from 91. Still, the event marked a change of direction for the World Wrestling Federation, with the Warrior leaving soon and Hulk Hogan also debating his wrestling future. Vince McMahon realised that the smaller competitors on his roster could put on more exciting matches. Guys like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart were the catalyst for such changes, and it didn't take long for the company to put more faith in their more athletic superstars. The WWF would return for UK exclusive pay-per-views, but they never came back for a full-blown big pay-per-view like a SummerSlam or WrestleMania, even though fans have requested such an event for years and years. The time difference has always been the big concern, and really it's been the big excuse. But nowadays, with the phasing out of pay-per-view buys and the emphasis now on the WWE Network, you'd like to think that the WWE has considered holding another big event in the United Kingdom. Fingers crossed it happens in the near future. Thanks very much for watching, and take care.